He mocked the little rose seller, but was shocked when she responded in Japanese. An unexpected connection will forever change the life of this arrogant billionaire and the 8-year-old girl. Leave your like, subscribe and comment where you're watching this emotional story that will touch your heart. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly as Amelia Rowan arranged the last bouquet of roses on the rickety folding table. Her small fingers, already calloused despite being only 8 years old, worked with practiced precision. Beside her, Lucille Rowan dabbed at her forehead with a worn handkerchief, her eyes darting anxiously toward the crowd exiting the Highland Mall. "Remember, sweetie, we need to sell at least 15 bouquets today," Lucille whispered, her voice betraying the fatigue she fought to hide. The medical bills tucked into her purse weighed heavier than the flowers they carried each morning. Amelia nodded solemnly. "I'll try my hardest, Mama." She straightened her second-hand dress and practiced her brightest smile, the one that sometimes convinced hurried shoppers to pause, if only for a moment. As the afternoon crowd thinned, Amelia spotted a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit approaching. Unlike the others, he wasn't rushing. His gaze, calculating and cold, swept over their modest display before settling on Amelia. "Damien Cole," Lucille breathed, recognition flickering across her face as she instinctively stepped closer to her daughter. The billionaire's presence created an immediate vacuum around them, known for his ruthless business tactics and disdain for weakness. Damien Cole was as feared as he was wealthy. His empire stretched across continents, but his reputation for cruelty reached even further. "How much?" he asked. His voice clipped as he gestured toward the flowers without looking at Lucille. $20 for the premium bouquet, sir," Amelia answered, before her mother could speak. Something like amusement flickered across his face. "Rather expensive for street flowers, wouldn't you say?" Amelia's shoulders squared almost imperceptibly. "They're fresh cut this morning, sir. My mama picks only the best ones." Damien's eyes narrowed as he studied the child. The crowd around them seemed to hold its breath. Several onlookers had stopped, phones discreetly recording the interaction between the notorious billionaire and the little flower seller. "Tell you what," he said, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll make you a deal." His voice lowered to a theatrical whisper, ensuring the growing audience could still hear. "If you can sell me these roses in Japanese, I'll give you $100,000. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Lucille paled, her hand finding Amelia's shoulder. "Sir, please," she began, but Damien raised his hand, silencing her without even a glance. "Well, little girl." His eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction. "Speechless, I thought as much." Amelia's gaze dropped to her worn sneakers, and Damien turned to leave, having secured the public humiliation he'd orchestrated. "Kono bara wa anata no kokoro ni hikari o ataeru deshu." Amelia's voice, small but clear, stopped him mid-stride. "These roses will bring light to your heart." The crowd fell silent. Damien turned slowly, genuine surprise replacing his practiced condescension. "Watashi no haha wa ai o komete sodate mashita," Amelia continued, her pronunciation halting but determined. "My mother grew them with love." Across town, in her small apartment, Lucille's unpaid medical bills lay scattered across the kitchen table. The most recent MRI results, inconclusive but concerning, sat unopened in her bedside drawer. She had hidden both from Amelia, whose childhood was already overshadowed by too many adult worries, unknown to either Rowan. Veronica Hale observed the scene from the tinted windows of a luxury SUV parked nearby. As Damien's executive assistant and self-appointed gatekeeper, she watched with narrowing eyes as her employer's carefully cultivated mask of indifference cracked, revealing something she hadn't seen in their 5 years together. Genuine emotion. "This is trouble," she murmured, making a note in her ever-present tablet. Damien stared at Amelia for a long moment. Something in the child's determined stance and earnest expression triggered a memory he had spent decades burying. Of another child, hungry and desperate, promising anything to survive. "Where did you learn Japanese?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "At the library with Mrs. Parker. She teaches languages to kids after school," Amelia replied. My daddy always wanted to visit Japan before he—" Her voice faltered momentarily. "I'm learning for him." Damien's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet instead of the promised amount. He withdrew several $100 bills. "I'll take all of them," he said, placing the money in Lucille's stunned hands and gathering every bouquet. "And I'll be back for more," as he walked away. Flowers spilling from his arms, the crowd erupted in confused murmurs. No one was more bewildered than Lucille herself, who clutched the money with shaking hands, while Amelia watched Damien's retreating figure with curious eyes. That night, as Amelia slept, Lucille counted the money for the third time. Exactly $5,000, more than enough for the next round of tests. And perhaps, finally, some answers. Damien Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. In his hand, a wilting rose, the last from Amelia's bouquets, served as an uncomfortable reminder of the afternoon's events. "You've been distracted since you returned," Veronica observed, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she approached with his evening schedule. "The board meeting is in 20 minutes. Damien didn't acknowledge her presence. Instead, his mind replayed the determined look in Amelia's eyes, a look he recognized from his own childhood reflections. "Run a complete background check on Lucille and Amelia Rowan," he said suddenly. "Everything, medical history, finances, family connections." Veronica's perfectly manicured nails paused above her tablet. "The flower sellers, surely you don't—" "Just do it," he interrupted, finally turning to face her, "and find out everything about this Mrs. Parker and her language program." 30 minutes later, in a corporate boardroom that cost more than most homes, Damien sat distracted as his executives presented quarterly projections. Marcus Grant, his longtime attorney and the closest thing he had to a friend, noticed his uncharacteristic detachment. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Marcus asked as they exited the meeting. "I've known you since Harvard Law, and I've never seen you miss a financial discrepancy that obvious." Damien loosened his tie with uncharacteristic agitation. "I met someone today who reminded me of things I've worked hard to forget." "A woman." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "A child," Damien replied quietly. Across town, in a cramped apartment filled with second-hand furniture and fresh flowers, Lucille Rowan struggled to suppress a cough as she tucked Amelia into bed. "Mom, are you okay?" Amelia's small face creased with worry beyond her years. "Just tired, sweetie." Lucille forced a smile. "You were amazing today. Do you think he'll really come back?" Amelia asked, her eyes wide with hope. Lucille smoothed her daughter's hair. "People like Mr. Cole don't usually return to places like our corner." At the West Side Public Library, elderly Mrs. Parker organized flashcards for tomorrow's language session. The Japanese lessons had started 3 years ago, when a grieving Amelia first arrived clutching her late father's travel magazine featuring Tokyo. The child's determination to learn her father's dream language had touched the retired linguist's heart. The following morning, Veronica placed a slim folder on Damien's desk. "The Rowan file as requested. It's rather predictable." Damien scanned the documents with increasing discomfort. Lucille Rowan, 34, widowed 3 years ago when her husband died in a construction accident, mounting medical bills for symptoms doctors couldn't diagnose, working 3 jobs while raising Amelia alone. Bank account hovering perpetually near zero. His eyes lingered on a hospital form, indicating Lucille had cancelled her most recent follow-up appointment, the same day their rent was due. "Create a foundation," he said abruptly. Closing the file. "The Cole Educational Initiative. First priority, funding Mrs. Parker's language program at Westside Library." Veronica's composure slipped momentarily. "A foundation for a random library program you discovered yesterday." "Second priority," Damien continued as if she hadn't spoken, "will be a medical grant program for uninsured single parents." "This is about those flower sellers, isn't it?" Veronica's voice hardened. "Damien, we have the Wellington merger next week. We don't have time for sudden charitable impulses." Something in her tone made Damien look up sharply. Last I checked, Veronica, you work for me, not the other way around. Marcus, entering with contracts, sensed the tension immediately. As Veronica stormed out, he raised a questioning eyebrow. She'll get over it, Damien muttered. What exactly are you doing? Marcus asked cautiously. Damien stared at the photograph of Amelia included in the file. Her serious eyes reminded him of another child, himself at 10, promising his dying mother he would never be poor or helpless again. I'm not entirely sure, he admitted that afternoon. Lucille collapsed while arranging flowers at her second job as paramedics loaded her into an ambulance. Her co-worker called the emergency contact listed in her file. West Side Library, Mrs. Parker, holding Amelia's trembling hand in the hospital waiting room, looked up to see a man in an expensive suit speaking urgently to the head nurse. Minutes later, Lucille was transferred to a private room. Specialists were called in, and a social worker assured Mrs. Parker that everything had been taken care of. When the librarian asked who had arranged it, the social worker simply pointed to a small plaque on the wall. The Cole Foundation, healing families, building futures. Lucille stared at the crisp white envelope in her hand, postmarked from the Cole Foundation. Inside, an approved application for comprehensive medical coverage, one she had never submitted. It has to be a mistake, she murmured, the hospital's harsh fluorescent lights making her already pale face appear ghostly. Or a scam. Mrs. Parker, arranging fresh flowers beside Lucille's bed, pursed her lips thoughtfully. Mistakes that pay for specialists don't happen often, dear. Perhaps someone nominated you. Amelia sat cross-legged on the visitor chair, carefully folding origami paper as she had learned in Mrs. Parker's Japanese culture lessons. Her small fingers creased each fold with deliberate concentration, a technique that had become her coping mechanism whenever her mother's illness frightened her. I like the doctor with the fuzzy eyebrows, Amelia announced. Breaking the tense silence, he didn't talk to me like I'm a baby. A soft knock interrupted them as Maya, a girl about Amelia's age, peeked around the door. Behind her stood her mother in hospital scrubs. We brought pudding, Maya announced, holding up a small container. Chocolate's the best medicine. While the girls shared the treat by the window, Maya's mother, a nurse named Elena, quietly updated Lucille. Dr. Reeves wants to start you on the new treatment protocol tomorrow, she explained. It's experimental, but promising for undiagnosed inflammatory conditions. And expensive, Lucille added, her voice tight. How much will this miracle foundation actually cover? Elena's expression softened. Everything, Lucille, and then some. That night, across town in his penthouse, Damien Cole thrashed in his sleep. Tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets worth more than most people's monthly salary. In his dream, he was 10 again, hiding in a closet as his father raged through their trailer, searching for money that didn't exist. He woke with a gasp, sweat-soaked and disoriented. The city lights glittered below his window, reminding him how far he had climbed, and how desperately he had erased every trace of that frightened boy. Reaching for his phone, he called Marcus despite the late hour. I need you to do something off the books, he said without preamble. The following afternoon, Mrs. Parker observed Amelia's Japanese lesson with renewed interest. The child had always been a dedicated student, but today she seemed almost possessed by determination. Okasan wa byoki ni naru kamoshirenai, Amelia practiced carefully. Mother may be sick. Very good pronunciation, Mrs. Parker praised. But perhaps we could learn happier phrases today? Amelia shook her head, her small jaw set stubbornly. I need to know the right words if doctors talk about Mom. In that moment, Mrs. Parker noticed a tall figure observing them through the library window, a man who quickly turned away when spotted. She had seen enough newspaper photographs to recognize Damien Cole, even with his attempted disguise of casual clothes and sunglasses. Later that week, Lucille opened her apartment door to find a delivery. Boxes of groceries, children's books, and a small laptop with a note claiming she had won a community raffle sponsored by the Cole Foundation. It feels wrong, Lucille confided to Elena during her treatment. like charity we haven't earned. Would you refuse medicine your daughter needs? Elena asked gently. Sometimes grace arrives unexpectedly. Veronica Hale, meanwhile, scrutinized the Cole Foundation's expenditures with mounting alarm. What had begun as a modest educational initiative was rapidly expanding, with Damien personally approving every detail of the medical program. A program with exactly one participant so far. Your sudden interest in philanthropy is affecting our core business, she informed him coldly, sliding quarterly reports across his desk. The board is asking questions. Let them ask. Damien barely glanced at the reports. They're also questioning your judgment, Veronica pressed, especially after you missed the Wellington negotiation to attend a children's presentation at a public library. Damien looked up sharply. You're having me followed. I'm protecting your interests, she replied smoothly. Someone has to. As she left, Marcus entered with a concerned expression. She's right about one thing, he said, closing the door. You've changed, Damien. I'm just not sure if it's for better or worse. That evening, Amelia stood on stage at the library's cultural showcase, reciting a Japanese poem about cherry blossoms. From the back row, hidden behind taller audience members, Damien Cole watched, unexpectedly moved by her earnest performance. He didn't notice Mrs. Parker studying him with knowing eyes, nor Veronica documenting his attendance from the parking lot. He saw only Amelia, and the ghost of possibilities his own childhood might have held under different circumstances. You're sure this is accidental? Lucille asked, stirring her hospital tea suspiciously. Elena nodded, gesturing toward the cafeteria's other tables. Complete coincidence, the benefit dinner for the pediatric ward always brings in corporate sponsors. Across the room, Damien Cole sat with hospital administrators. Apparently absorbed in their conversation, only the occasional glance toward Lucille's table betrayed his awareness of her presence. He's not what I expected, Lucille admitted quietly. On TV he seems terrifying, Elena supplied with a small smile. Unreachable, Lucille corrected, feeling her cheeks warm inexplicably. After the administrators left, Damien remained, seemingly engrossed in his coffee. Lucille, gathering her courage, approached his table. Mr. Cole, her voice was steadier than she felt. I believe I owe you thanks for the roses you purchased. Damien looked up, his practiced mask of indifference slipping momentarily. Mrs. Rowan, I didn't realize you were here. The lie fell flat between them. It's me's, she corrected gently, and we both know this isn't coincidence. Something like respect flickered across his face. Would you like to sit? Meanwhile, at Westside Elementary, Amelia faced the consequences of their changing circumstances. Her new clothes, modest but no longer second-hand, and her sudden academic resources had drawn attention. Your mom must be sleeping with someone rich, hissed Brittany, the class's self-appointed queen bee. That's why you got new stuff. Amelia's hands curled into fists. Take that back. Or what? Brittany taunted. You'll sell me flowers. Maya stepped between them, her expression fierce. Back off. Brittany, just because your dad buys your friends doesn't mean everyone's like that. Across town, Veronica Hale entered the office of private investigator Frank Mendez. Find me anything I can use, she instructed, sliding a photograph of Lucille across his desk. Everyone has secrets. Frank raised an eyebrow. This isn't your usual corporate espionage. Consider it preventative maintenance, Veronica replied coolly. Mr. Cole has developed an unhealthy interest. I need to protect him from himself. Back at the hospital cafeteria, Damien and Lucille discovered an unexpected ease in conversation. Amelia's language skills are remarkable, Damien commented. She must take after you. Lucille laughed, a genuine sound that surprised them both. Hardly, that's all Robert, my late husband. He was fascinated by different cultures, always planning trips we couldn't afford. Her expression softened with memory. He died still dreaming of Japan. I'm sorry, Damien said, and meant it. What about your family? Lucille asked. Something shuttered behind Damien's eyes. There's not much to tell. Before Lucille could respond, Her phone chimed with a text from the school. She paled visibly. "Amelia's in the principal's office," she explained, gathering her things hurriedly. "I have to go." "I'll drive you," Damien offered immediately. Lucille hesitated only briefly before nodding. At Westside Elementary, Principal Garner looked up in surprise as Lucille entered his office, accompanied by Damien Cole, whose reputation preceded him. "Ms. Rowan, Mr. Cole." The principal stood clearly flustered. "I wasn't expecting—" "What happened with my daughter?" Lucille interrupted. Amelia sat small and defiant in an oversized chair, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. "There was an altercation during recess," Principal Garner explained. "Amelia struck another student. She called my mom bad names," Amelia said quietly. "I told her to stop 3 times. Damien knelt to Amelia's eye level, a gesture so uncharacteristic that even Lucille stared. "Did you warn her what would happen if she didn't stop?" he asked seriously. Amelia nodded. "Then you honored your word," Damien said simply. "Sometimes that has consequences." Principal Garner cleared his throat. "Mr. Cole, with all due respect, hitting another student should have consequences for Amelia too," Damien finished smoothly, standing to his full height. "Perhaps a thoughtful essay on alternative conflict resolution. I'm sure the Cole Foundation's educational initiative would be interested in the most innovative approaches." The principal's objections evaporated as quickly as they'd formed. Later, in Damien's car, an awkward silence settled until Amelia spoke from the back seat. "Are you Mom's boyfriend now?" "Amelia," Lucille gasped. Damien surprisingly chuckled, a rusty sound as if rarely used. "No, I'm just a friend who buys flowers." "Good," Amelia decided. "Because Mom says we don't need anyone to rescue us." Damien's eyes met Lucille's in the rearview mirror. "Your mother is absolutely right." That evening, Marcus confronted Damien in his office. "You missed the Beijing conference call to attend a school disciplinary meeting." "The board is beyond concern, Damien. They're preparing contingencies." "Let them," Damien replied, his attention on a Japanese language textbook open on his desk. Marcus sighed heavily. "What's happening to you? Is this some kind of midlife crisis?" Damien finally looked up. "Did you know I grew up in a trailer park in Nevada, that my father drank himself to death, and my mother worked herself into an early grave trying to feed me?" Marcus stared, speechless. "Of course not," Damien continued. "I've spent 20 years burying that boy so thoroughly that even my oldest friend never suspected. Why tell me now? Because today I saw him again, in an 8-year-old girl defending her mother's honor." Damien closed the textbook. "And I'm not sure I can go back to pretending he never existed." "Another coincidence?" Lucille asked, unable to keep the amusement from her voice, as Damien appeared at the park bench, where she often read during Amelia's Saturday lessons. "Pure chance," he agreed solemnly, offering a coffee cup. "Cream, no sugar, if memory serves." Lucille accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing briefly. "You're not very good at casual stalking, Mr. Cole." "Damien," he corrected, "and I prefer to call it strategic investment monitoring." Nearby, through the library windows, Mrs. Parker observed their interaction while helping Amelia and Maya with origami cranes. The elderly librarian's expression wavered between concern and cautious hope. "You've been monitoring quite intensively lately," Lucille noted, turning slightly to face him. 3 park meetings, 2 hospital coincidences, and somehow tickets to the museum exhibit Amelia mentioned exactly once during her language lesson. Damien's expression, normally guarded, softened imperceptibly. "Is that a complaint or an observation?" Before Lucille could answer, her phone chimed with a hospital notification. She frowned at the screen. "That's strange. My treatment session has been rescheduled due to equipment maintenance." Across town, in a sterile office overlooking the city, Veronica Hale replaced her phone and smiled thinly at the hospital administrator sitting nervously before her. "The Cole Foundation appreciates your discretion in this matter," she said smoothly. "Temporary equipment issues are so common, aren't they?" The administrator nodded uncomfortably. but postponing her specific treatment sequence could potentially create continued dependence on our funding, Veronica finished. Precisely. Back at the park, Damien's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Marcus. He silenced it without looking away from Lucille. "I have a confession," he said quietly. "The Cole Foundation isn't coincidental. I created it specifically after meeting you and Amelia." Lucille's expression shifted between surprise, confusion, and something like hurt. "Why, what could you possibly want from us?" "Nothing," Damien answered honestly. "That's what's so disorienting." Inside the library, Maya leaned closer to Amelia. "You know who that is with your mom, right?" Amelia nodded solemnly, folding another paper crane. "The billionaire who bought our flowers." "Not just any billionaire," Maya whispered. "My mom says he's famous for being super mean to everybody. They call him the Demolisher because he destroys companies." Amelia's hand stilled on the colorful paper. "He doesn't seem mean to us." "Exactly," Maya said significantly. "My mum thinks it's weird." Mrs. Parker, overhearing, gently intervened. "Sometimes people become different than what their reputation suggests, especially when given a chance to remember who they truly are." That evening, as Lucille helped Amelia with homework at their small kitchen table, she broached the subject carefully. "How would you feel if Mr. Cole came to dinner sometime?" Amelia looked up from her math problem. "Are you going to marry him?" Lucille nearly choked on her tea. "What, no, we're barely even friends." "Maya says he's only nice to us because he likes you," Amelia continued matter-of-factly, "like in those movies where the rich person falls in love with the normal person. Real life isn't a movie." "Sweetie," Lucille said, her cheeks warming. Amelia returned to her homework. "If he makes you smile, he can come to dinner, but I'm watching him." Across town, Marcus confronted Damien in his penthouse. "You've missed 4 board meetings this month," he said, pacing anxiously. "Veronica's stepping in, making decisions, telling everyone you've approved them." Damien barely looked up from the Japanese phrasebook he was studying. "Let her. Most of it is meaningless bureaucracy anyway." "This isn't like you," Marcus insisted. "The Damien Cole I know would never let someone else take control." "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think," Damien replied quietly. The next day, Mrs. Parker intercepted Damien as he was leaving the library after observing Amelia's lesson. "Your interest in the Rowans," she began without preamble. "Is it genuine?" Damien, caught off guard by her directness, considered deflection but found himself answering honestly. "More genuine than anything I've felt in decades." The elderly librarian studied him with penetrating eyes. "Lucille and Amelia have endured enough loss. They don't need charity or curiosity. They need constancy." "I'm beginning to understand that," Damien admitted. Mrs. Parker nodded once, decisively. "Then perhaps you should come to their apartment for dinner Friday." Amelia mentioned Lucille is making spaghetti. As Damien walked to his car, he didn't notice the telephoto lens capturing his every movement from a parked sedan across the street. Inside, Frank Mendez lowered his camera and made a call. "Ms. Hale, I think I've got what you wanted." The following morning, Lucille opened her apartment door to find a courier holding an envelope. "Delivery for Miss Rowan," he announced. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a typed note. "For exclusive interview regarding your relationship with Damien Cole, call this number to arrange." Lucille stared at the check for a long moment before deliberately tearing it into pieces. The headlines exploded across every platform simultaneously. As if orchestrated, Billionaire's secret charity case blazed above grainy photos of Damien with Lucille and Amelia. Cole's calculated kindness, the real story, proclaimed another, featuring Damien exiting the hospital beside Lucille. Amelia noticed the changed atmosphere immediately when she arrived at school. Whispers followed her through the hallways. Teachers gave her pitying glances. "My mom says your mom is his mistress," Brittany announced loudly in the cafeteria. Brandishing her phone with a tabloid website displayed, "That's why he pays your bills." Maya knocked the phone from Brittany's hand. "Shut up! You don't know anything!" As the girls scuffled, Amelia stood frozen. The unfamiliar word echoing in her mind. At Cole Enterprises, Damien stormed into the conference room where Veronica was briefing nervous executives. "What did you do?" he demanded, throwing the morning papers onto the table. Veronica's composure never wavered. "I protected the company from a potential scandal. The board thanks me, even if you don't. By having them followed, by fabricating a relationship that doesn't exist. Doesn't it?" Veronica countered smoothly. "You've missed critical meetings to attend a child's school events. You've created a foundation that primarily benefits one family. You've been photographed with this woman more than any of your actual relationships." The executive shifted uncomfortably as Damien's expression darkened. "The board has concerns about your judgment," Veronica continued. "These stories simply bring everything into the open where it can be managed." Before Damien could respond, his phone rang. Lucille's number. He stepped out to answer. "Damien?" Lucille's voice was tight with controlled emotion. "Amelia's school just called. There was an incident." 30 minutes later, Damien entered the principal's office to find Amelia sitting alone, her expression uncharacteristically closed. "Your mother's on her way," Principal Garner explained awkwardly. "She asked if you could wait with Amelia." When they were alone, Damien knelt beside her chair. "Want to tell me what happened?" "They said bad things about my mum," Amelia whispered. "They showed me pictures of us on their phones. They said you're only helping us because—" She couldn't finish. Damien felt something crack inside him, a fissure in the carefully constructed wall between who he was and who he had become. "Amelia," he said gently, "people often say cruel things about what they don't understand." "Is it true?" she asked, looking up with eyes too old for her young face. "Are you only being nice to us because you want something?" The question struck him with unexpected force. "No," he answered, surprising himself with his certainty. "I'm being nice because you and your mother reminded me of something important I'd forgotten." The door opened as Lucille rushed in, her face pale with worry. She hesitated when she saw Damien. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "Not with everything being said." "Mom, it wasn't his fault," Amelia protested. Lucille's expression softened as she knelt to embrace her daughter. "I know, sweetie, but sometimes being connected to certain people comes with a price we didn't agree to pay." Damien stood, the dismissal clear. "Lucille, if you'll let me explain." "Not now," she interrupted. "Not with Amelia here, and not with photographers probably waiting outside." He nodded once, respecting her boundary, and left without another word. That evening, Mrs. Parker arrived at the Rowans' apartment with groceries and a grim expression. "The vultures are circling," she announced, setting down the bags. "There were reporters asking questions at the library today." Lucille sank onto the couch. "This is exactly what I feared. Attention we never wanted. They asked about Amelia's father," Mrs. Parker continued carefully. "About Robert's accident." "What?" Lucille paled. "Why would they care about that?" Mrs. Parker's expression turned sympathetic. "They're constructing a narrative, dear. The tragic widow, the vulnerable child, the powerful savior." "It's not like that," Lucille insisted. "I know," the elderly librarian replied gently, "but perception becomes reality unless challenged." Across town, Damien confronted Marcus in his penthouse. "I need to know if you were part of this," he demanded, gesturing to the tabloids spread across his coffee table. Marcus looked genuinely shocked. "Of course not. This has Veronica written all over it. She claims the board supported her. They're nervous." "Damien," Marcus explained, "your behavior has been erratic. The Wellington deal collapsed without your input. Stocks dropped 3 points this morning after these stories broke." Damien paced restlessly. "None of that matters compared to what Lucille and Amelia are enduring because of me." Marcus studied his friend with newfound understanding. "You really care about them." "I do," Damien admitted, "and I've ruined their lives trying to improve them." His phone chimed with an incoming message from Lucille. "We need to talk privately tomorrow." The following morning, Lucille sat alone in a quiet corner of a small cafe, far from both her neighborhood and Damien's corporate headquarters. "Thank you for coming," she said, as he slid into the seat across from her. "Lucille, I had nothing to do with those stories." Damien began immediately. She raised a hand to stop him. "I believe you, but that doesn't change what's happening." Her expression was resolved, her voice steady, despite the dark circles under her eyes. "Amelia came home crying yesterday, asking me what a mistress is," she continued. "She shouldn't have to learn such words because of me, because of us, whatever this is. I can fix this," Damien insisted. "I can make it go away." Lucille shook her head sadly. "Some things can't be fixed with money or power. Damien, some damage can't be undone." She stood, gathering her purse. "I appreciate everything you've done for us, but I need to protect my daughter. Please don't contact us again." As she walked away, Damien remained seated, watching her go, and for the first time in decades, he felt utterly powerless. Damien Cole, the man financial magazines once called ruthlessly focused, sat in his darkened office at 3 a.m. A half-empty whiskey bottle on his desk. 3 weeks had passed since Lucille's request that he stay away. 3 weeks of returning to his old patterns, commanding boardrooms, closing mergers, destroying competitors. All while feeling increasingly hollow, his phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Board meeting in 5 hours. Be there, or Veronica pushes the vote." Damien drained his glass and turned back to the quarterly reports. The numbers swimming before his tired eyes. Across town, Lucille stood in her bathroom, staring at the pill bottles lined neatly on the shelf. The Foundation's medical coverage had been quietly cancelled. Administrative error, according to the apologetic letter. Her symptoms had returned with a vengeance, but pride kept her from reaching out to Damien. "Mom," Amelia's voice, small and frightened, came through the door. "Are you okay? You've been in there a long time." Lucille quickly wiped her eyes and opened the door with a forced smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Let's get you ready for school." Amelia's usual brightness had dimmed in recent weeks. The media attention had eventually faded, but the damage was done. Children could be cruelly persistent, and rumors had a long half-life in elementary schools. At the library after school, Mrs. Parker noticed Amelia's listless approach to her once-beloved Japanese lessons. "Your heart isn't in it today," the elderly librarian observed gently. Amelia's small shoulders slumped. "What's the point? Dad's never going to see Japan, and now Mom's getting sick again." Mrs. Parker's expression sharpened. "Your mother's treatments have stopped." "She thinks I don't know," Amelia confided. "But I heard her on the phone with the hospital, something about coverage and paperwork." That evening, Mrs. Parker made a rare visit to Cole Enterprises, navigating the intimidating security desk with surprising determination. "Mr. Cole doesn't see anyone without an appointment," the receptionist explained firmly. "Tell him Mrs. Parker from West Side Library is here about Amelia Rowan," she replied, settling comfortably into a visitor chair. "I'll wait." 20 minutes later, she was escorted to Damien's office, where she found him reviewing documents with Veronica and several executives. "This meeting is concluded," Damien announced abruptly upon seeing Mrs. Parker. Veronica lingered as the others filed out. "The Tokyo proposal needs your signature by—" "Later," Damien interrupted, his attention fixed on the elderly librarian. Once they were alone, Mrs. Parker spoke without preamble. "Lucille's treatments have been cancelled. Amelia says her mother is getting sicker." Damien's expression darkened. "That's impossible. The Foundation's funding was guaranteed for a year. Minimum. Perhaps you should verify that with your staff," Mrs. Parker suggested pointedly, "particularly those who might benefit from severing your connection to the Rowans." Understanding dawned in Damien's eyes. "Veronica," he murmured. "She wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't she?" Mrs. Parker challenged. Amelia also found this in their mailbox. She handed him a business card for Frank Mendez, private investigator. With a note scrawled on the back, "Still interested in that interview, price just doubled." Damien's hands tightened around the card. "I'll fix this." "That's what you said last time," Mrs. Parker reminded him gently. "Perhaps this situation requires more than your money or your anger." At Cole Enterprises, Marcus discovered financial irregularities while reviewing the foundation's records. These treatment authorizations were cancelled 3 weeks ago, he told Damien. Spreading documents across the desk. Someone with executive override access countermanded your instructions. Damien's expression hardened as he examined the electronic signature. Get me everything Veronica has accessed in the last month. Everything? Meanwhile, Lucille collapsed while restocking flowers at her part-time job. By the time Maya's mother Elena reached the hospital for her shift, rumors were already circulating about the patient who had arrived without insurance coverage. You'd need to call someone, Elena insisted, sitting beside Lucille's hospital bed. Your condition is deteriorating. Lucille shook her head weakly. I won't give Veronica the satisfaction. We survived before Damien Cole. We'll survive after. This isn't about pride, Elena argued. It's about Amelia having a mother. Across town, Amelia sat in the library's back room with Mrs. Parker, carefully examining old photographs and papers from a box labeled Robert's Things. Your father kept detailed journals about his interest in Japan, Mrs. Parker explained, helping Amelia turn fragile pages. There might be something here that explains why it mattered so much to him. Amelia's fingers paused on a newspaper clipping from 15 years earlier. Construction worker saves visiting executive, read the headline above a grainy photo of a younger Robert Rowan standing beside a Japanese man. I never saw this before, Amelia whispered. Mrs. Parker adjusted her glasses to examine the clipping. The article says your father prevented a scaffold collapse that would have killed a visiting businessman named Takahashi in his office. Damien confronted Veronica with the evidence Marcus had compiled. You deliberately cancelled Lucille's medical coverage, he stated, his voice deadly calm. You hired a private investigator to harass her. You planted those tabloid stories. Veronica's composure never wavered. I protected this company from your inexplicable obsession with a nobody flower seller and her brat. You're fired, Damien said simply. Veronica laughed, a cold, confident sound. The board votes tomorrow on your continued leadership. Given your erratic behavior and the Wellington disaster, I'd say my position is more secure than yours. Get out, Damien ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Security will escort you to clear your office. As she reached the door, Veronica turned with a parting shot. She's back in the hospital, you know. Apparently, her condition deteriorated rapidly once the experimental treatment stopped. Such a shame. The color drained from Damien's face as Veronica's words registered. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and rushed past her. That night, as Amelia slept fitfully in a chair beside her mother's hospital bed, Mrs. Parker arrived with a discovery that would change everything. I need to speak with Damien Cole immediately, she told Elena urgently. Clutching Robert Rowan's journal, it's about Lucille and Amelia and a debt that was never acknowledged. Rain lashed against the hospital windows as Marcus burst through the emergency room doors. Scanning frantically for Damien, he found him standing motionless outside Lucille's room, staring through the small window at Amelia asleep beside her mother's bed. You need to see this, Marcus said urgently, holding out his tablet. I've been digging through archives since your call. The screen displayed a 15-year-old news article with the headline, Heroic Construction Worker Saves Japanese Executive, Robert Rowan, Damien read aloud, his voice hollow with dawning realization. Lucille's husband. The Japanese executive he saved was Hiroshi Takahashi, Marcus continued. Your uncle, the man who funded your first business venture. Damien's hand trembled slightly as he absorbed the implications. If Robert hadn't saved him that day, you'd never have received the startup capital that built everything you have, Marcus finished. Your entire empire exists because of Amelia's father. Inside the room, Mrs. Parker gently shook Amelia awake. There's someone here who needs to speak with you, dear. The child rubbed her eyes sleepily, then froze at the sight of Damien standing in the doorway. Her expression hardened with a wariness no 8-year-old should possess. You made Mum sad, she accused quietly, and then she got sick again. Damien approached slowly, kneeling to meet her eye level. I know, Amelia, and I'm more sorry than I can say. Lucille stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Damien! Her voice was weak, confusion evident in her feverish gaze. You shouldn't be here. He needs to be here, Mrs. Parker interjected firmly, placing Robert's journal on the bed. There's something you both need to know. As the elderly librarian explained the connection between Robert Rowan and Hiroshi Takahashi, Damien watched understanding dawn on Lucille's pale face. So, all this, the foundation, the help, it was guilt, Lucille asked, her voice strengthening with anger, repaying a debt. No, Damien answered honestly. I didn't know about the connection until tonight. Everything I did was because... He hesitated, unused to articulating genuine emotion, because Amelia's courage that day reminded me of who I used to be before I buried that boy under ambition and anger. And who was that? Lucille challenged. Someone who remembered what it felt like to be helpless, he replied quietly. Someone who promised never to forget where he came from. The sincerity in his voice reached Lucille, softening her expression slightly. I have one more thing to tell you, Damien continued. Veronica was responsible for cancelling your treatments. She saw my interest in you and Amelia as a threat to her position. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Lucille asked. Though without the edge, her words might have carried moments before. No, Damien admitted. It's supposed to make you understand that I never intended to abandon you, either of you. Across town, Veronica worked feverishly in her office, deleting files and packing essential items. Her phone rang. Frank Mendez. I've got a problem, the investigator began without preamble. Cole's people are combing through my records. They know about our arrangement. Destroy everything, Veronica ordered, and forget we ever spoke. Not that simple, Frank replied. They're offering immunity if I cooperate. I've got a family to think about. Veronica's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. You wouldn't dare. Already did, Frank admitted. They're on their way to you now. Back at the hospital, Marcus stepped into Lucille's room with news. The board meeting has been postponed, he announced. Apparently, several members received anonymous evidence of Veronica's actions this evening. They're calling for a full investigation. Mrs. Parker smiled enigmatically. How fortunate. Damien glanced at her suspiciously. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? A retired librarian with no technical skills? Mrs. Parker's eyes twinkled. Hardly, though I do have a nephew who works in cybersecurity. The tension in the room broken. Amelia looked up at Damien with cautious hope. Does this mean Mum's treatment can start again? Immediately, Damien promised. And this time no one will interfere. As dawn broke over the hospital, Lucille watched the sunrise from her bed, processing everything she had learned. Beside her, Amelia had finally fallen into restful sleep, her small hand still clutching her father's journal. He would have wanted you to know, Mrs. Parker said softly, following Lucille's gaze to the journal, about Takahashi, about how his act of courage created ripples he never got to see. It feels like he's still taking care of us somehow. Lucille whispered. Through the strangest connection imaginable. Outside the room, Damien spoke urgently with Elena about restarting Lucille's treatment protocol immediately. As they finalized details, Marcus approached with his tablet. Security just escorted Veronica from the building, he reported. And you should see this. The screen displayed security footage of Veronica attempting to access the server room, presumably to destroy evidence. The board wants to meet this afternoon, Marcus continued. Their tone has shifted considerably. Damien's focus remained on Lucille's room. Tell them I'll be there when Lucille's treatment is underway. Not before. Marcus studied his friend with newfound respect. You know, the Damien Cole I first met at Harvard would never have prioritized anyone over business. That Damien Cole was still running from a past he was ashamed of. Damien replied quietly. I'm not running anymore. Inside the room, Amelia stirred and opened her eyes, meeting Damien's gaze through the door window. After a moment's hesitation, she gave him a small, tentative wave. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Hospital monitors beeped steadily as Lucille's experimental treatment resumed. Amelia sat cross-legged on a chair nearby, carefully folding an origami crane while Damien watched from the doorway. "That's very precise work," he observed, entering cautiously. Amelia nodded without looking up. "Mrs. Parker says, if you fold 1,000 cranes, you get to make a wish. I'm on number 87. "That's a lot of folding," Damien said, taking the seat beside her. "What will you wish for?" Amelia gave him a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. For Mom to get better, of course. Across town, Veronica sat rigidly in a conference room as Marcus laid out the evidence against her. Financial tampering, corporate espionage, medical interference, he enumerated calmly. "The board is prepared to pursue criminal charges unless you agree to certain terms." Veronica's carefully applied makeup couldn't conceal her mounting desperation. "This is absurd. Everything I did was to protect Cole Enterprises." "From what exactly?" Marcus challenged. "A sick woman and her 8-year-old daughter. From Damien's self-destruction," Veronica snapped. "He was throwing away everything we built over some misplaced guilt or midlife crisis." Marcus slid a document across the table. "Sign this resignation and non-disclosure agreement. In return, the company won't press charges." Veronica's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the pen. "He'll regret this. People like Damien Cole don't change." "Not really." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus replied. "People exactly like Damien are the ones with the most capacity for change, once they stop running from who they really are." Back at the hospital, Mrs. Parker entered Lucille's room with a worn photo album. "Look what I found in Robert's storage box," she announced, placing it gently on Lucille's lap. "Photos from his year working on the Westlake Tower project." Lucille opened the album with trembling hands. "I haven't seen these in years." Together they flipped through images of a younger, smiling Robert at various construction sites midway through the album. They paused on a photo of Robert standing proudly beside a distinguished Japanese man. "Hiroshi Takahashi," Lucille murmured, tracing her late husband's face with her fingertip. "The day after the accident." "May I?" Damien asked quietly, gesturing toward the album. Lucille hesitated briefly before nodding. As Damien examined the photograph, recognition flickered across his face. "I have this same picture," he said softly, "in a box of my uncle's things. He called Robert his American hero." Amelia looked up from her origami. "Your uncle knew my dad. They stayed in touch for years," Damien confirmed. "Hiroshi sent him Japanese books and language materials. I never made the connection until now." Lucille's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The Japanese children's books that arrived every Christmas. They were from your uncle," Damien nodded. "He never forgot what your husband did. Neither did I, apparently, though I didn't realize the connection when we met." "So when I spoke Japanese that day," Amelia began. "It was like history repeating itself," Damien finished. "Your father's legacy reaching through time." The moment was interrupted as Elena entered with doctors. "Time for the next treatment phase," she announced. As medical staff prepared Lucille, Damien led Amelia to the hallway. "Let's get some hot chocolate while they work." In the cafeteria, Amelia studied Damien over her steaming cup. "Are you really a mean person like everyone says?" The directness of the question startled a genuine laugh from Damien. "I was," he admitted, "for a long time." Why, Damien considered how to explain complex adult realities to an 8-year-old. "I grew up very poor," he began. "My father was not a good man when I finally got away and became successful. I decided never to be vulnerable again." "So you became the opposite," Amelia reasoned. "But that didn't fix being scared when you were little." Damien stared at her, momentarily speechless at her insight. "No," he agreed finally, "it didn't. Mom says running from feelings just makes them chase you faster." "Your mother is very wise," Damien said softly. Meanwhile, Frank Mendez arrived at the hospital with a thick folder, requesting to speak with Lucille urgently. "I worked for Veronica Hale," he explained once admitted to her room. "I was paid to dig into your past, your husband's accident, everything." Lucille tensed visibly. And now I'm trying to make it right," Frank replied, setting the folder on her bed. "Everything I found, every photo I took, it's all here, no copies, no backups." "Why the change of heart, Mrs. Parker asked suspiciously. Frank's expression turned shamefaced. "My daughter's in Amelia's class when she came home crying because kids were teasing her friend about stories I helped create." He shook his head. "Some lines you don't cross." As Frank left, Damien and Amelia returned to find Lucille examining the folder's contents with Mrs. Parker. "What's all this?" Damien asked. "Closure?" Lucille answered simply. "Or the beginning of it." That evening, after Lucille had fallen asleep, Damien sat alone in the hospital waiting room, reviewing documents on his tablet. Marcus found him there, looking more disheveled than anyone had ever seen the normally impeccable billionaire. "The board meeting went well," Marcus reported. "Veronica's resignation has been accepted. They've agreed to your restructuring proposal, including the expanded foundation work." Damien nodded absently, his attention elsewhere. "What are you working on so intently?" Marcus inquired, peering at the tablet. "Japanese lessons," Damien admitted somewhat sheepishly. "Apparently I've been mispronouncing basic phrases for weeks." Marcus smiled knowingly. "You really care about them, don't you? Not just out of obligation or guilt." Damien set the tablet aside, finally meeting his friend's gaze. "They showed me that everything I've built means nothing if I've lost myself in the process." Before Marcus could respond, Elena rushed into the waiting room. "You need to come quickly. Lucille's had a reaction to the treatment." Damien bolted to his feet, all composure forgotten as he raced after her in Lucille's room. Doctors worked frantically as monitors blared warnings. Through the window, Damien could see Amelia being gently restrained by Mrs. Parker, the child's face contorted in terrified anguish. "What's happening?" he demanded of a passing nurse. "Severe inflammatory response," she replied tersely. "Her system is rejecting the treatment." As Damien watched helplessly, a strange calm settled over him, a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The sensation reminded him of that moment weeks ago when Amelia had surprised him with her Japanese, breaking through decades of carefully constructed walls. When the doctors finally emerged, their expressions were cautiously optimistic. "We've stabilized her," the lead physician explained, "but we need to adjust the treatment protocol completely. Her condition is more complex than initially diagnosed." "Whatever she needs," Damien said immediately. "Cost is irrelevant." Later that night, as Amelia finally slept curled against her recovering mother, Damien stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Mrs. Parker joined him, her usual energetic presence subdued by exhaustion. "You know what Amelia said when I told her Lucille would be okay?" the elderly librarian asked quietly. "She said her crane folding was working." "Number 87 seems to have special powers," Damien observed with a small smile. Mrs. Parker studied him thoughtfully. "When Amelia first came to my language class 3 years ago, she told me she needed to learn Japanese because her daddy promised to take her there someday. After he died, she decided the promise was still valid, that she would go in his place." Damien's gaze shifted to the sleeping child. "She's extraordinary." "She is," Mrs. Parker agreed, "and so is her mother. They don't need rescuing." "Damien, they never did." "I'm beginning to understand that," he admitted. "What they gave me is far more valuable than anything I could offer them." "And what's that?" Damien watched as Lucille stirred in her sleep, her arm tightening protectively around Amelia, even in unconsciousness. "A way home," he answered simply. 6 months later, cherry blossoms drifted lazily through the spring air as Lucille adjusted the picnic blanket spread beneath a flowering tree in Memorial Park. Her movements were fluid and energetic, the experimental treatment protocol having finally achieved the right balance for her condition. "Mom, look!" Amelia called, pointing skyward where her handmade kite danced against the blue Texas sky. Beside her, Maya provided running commentary on their aeronautical success. "Amazing height," Damien observed, joining Lucille with a tray of drinks from a nearby cafe. He had abandoned his usual formal attire for casual jeans and a simple button-down shirt, a transformation as significant as any other change in recent months. "How did the board meeting go?" Lucille asked, accepting the iced tea he offered. "Surprisingly well," Damien replied, settling beside her. "The Cole Foundation's expansion has generated positive press. Apparently, corporate responsibility is good for the bottom line." Lucille smiled knowingly. "And the fact that you've stopped terrorizing competitors and actually sleep at night has nothing to do with your improved decision-making." "That might be a factor," Damien conceded with a chuckle. The past months had seen remarkable transformations for them all. Lucille's health had stabilized with the new treatment protocol. Amelia had blossomed in her advanced language program, now teaching basic Japanese phrases to her classmates. And Damien had systematically dismantled the walls he had spent decades building around himself. Mrs. Parker approached their blanket, accompanied by Marcus and Eleanor, all carrying contributions to the picnic. "I brought the sushi I promised," the elderly librarian announced proudly. "Made it myself after that cooking class." "Brave volunteers," Damien murmured to Lucille, who stifled a laugh as they arranged the food. Elena updated them on hospital news. "The pediatric language program is officially launching next month. Children in long-term care can now learn any of 6 languages during their stay." "The Cole Rowan initiative sounds better every time I hear it," Marcus commented. Unpacking containers, Lucille still felt a flutter of disbelief, hearing their names linked that way, not as a couple, but as partners in something meaningful. The foundation had expanded dramatically, focusing on medical access for uninsured families and educational opportunities for underserved communities. Veronica, they had heard, had relocated to Seattle, where she had taken a significantly lower position with a competing firm. Frank Mendez had unexpectedly found employment with the Foundation's Oversight Committee, his investigative skills repurposed for ensuring grant recipients actually received their intended benefits. As the adults prepared lunch, Amelia and Maya returned from their kite-flying expedition. "We've decided something important," Amelia announced, with the gravity only an 8-year-old could muster for such pronouncements. "This sounds serious," Lucille replied, matching her daughter's tone. "We think," Maya began, "that we should all go to Japan for spring break." A moment of surprised silence followed before Damien cleared his throat. "That's actually an interesting suggestion." "Really?" Lucille turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Hiroshi's memorial ceremony is next month in Kyoto," he explained. "I've been invited, and the invitation specifically mentioned bringing guests who might appreciate his connection to Robert." Amelia's eyes widened. "You mean we could actually go, for real?" "Only if your mother agrees," Damien clarified quickly. All eyes turned to Lucille, who found herself momentarily speechless. The thought of finally fulfilling Robert's dream, not just for Amelia but for herself too, was overwhelming. "I don't know," she began hesitantly. "International travel is expensive, and with my treatment schedule—" "The treatment can be administered anywhere," Elena interjected. "I've already checked with your doctors. They think the break from routine might actually benefit your progress. And as for expense," Marcus added, "the Foundation has an educational cultural exchange program that's been woefully underutilized." Lucille shot him a skeptical look. "Let me guess. This program was created last week." Marcus grinned unapologetically. "Last month, actually. Very forward-thinking of us." Mrs. Parker patted Lucille's hand. "Sometimes accepting help isn't surrender. Dear, it's collaboration." Later that afternoon, as the others packed up the picnic, Damien and Lucille walked along the park's cherry tree path. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. With undercurrents they both acknowledged, but neither rushed to define. "You orchestrated this whole Japan conversation, didn't you?" Lucille accused lightly. Damien held up his hands in mock surrender. I merely mentioned the memorial to Mrs. Parker. Everything else was Amelia's doing. She's been practicing that speech for days, Lucille admitted with a smile. Maya told me. They paused beneath a particularly full blossom canopy, pink petals drifting around them like snow. You know, Damien said thoughtfully, a year ago, I wouldn't have noticed these trees. I'd have walked past focusing on acquisition strategies or competitor weaknesses. And now I see them, he answered simply. I see everything more clearly. Lucille studied him, recognizing the truth in his words. The cold, calculating man who had challenged Amelia that day outside the mall had transformed as dramatically as their lives had. Japan would be an incredible experience for Amelia, she acknowledged, fulfilling Robert's dream for her in a way. For both of you, Damien corrected gently. You were part of that dream too. Lucille nodded, emotion tightening her throat unexpectedly. It feels like coming full circle somehow. Robert saves Hiroshi. Hiroshi helps you, you help us, and now we all honor both of them together. Life rarely offers such perfect symmetry, Damien agreed. It seems wrong to refuse it. Back at the picnic area, they found Amelia teaching Maya to fold an origami crane. Her collection had grown impressively over the months, displayed in Lucille's hospital room during treatments, and now hanging in colorful strings throughout their new apartment, provided by the foundation, but chosen by Lucille. An important distinction they both respected. Number 812, Amelia announced proudly, holding up the completed creation. Almost to your 1,000, Damien observed. But I already got my wish, Amelia replied, her simple certainty touching everyone present. Mom's getting better. Then what will you wish for when you reach 1,000? Mrs. Parker inquired. Amelia considered this seriously before answering. I think I'll save it for when somebody else needs a wish. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the cherry blossoms, they gathered their belongings to leave. Damien helped Lucille fold the blanket, their movements falling into comfortable synchronicity. So, he asked quietly, Japan. Lucille watched Amelia skipping ahead with Maya, her daughter's laughter floating back to them on the petal-filled breeze. Japan, she agreed with a smile that held both past and future in perfect balance. 2 weeks later, they stood together at Robert's grave, placing fresh flowers and a folded paper crane on the headstone. Amelia carefully positioned her creation, number 1,000, completed the night before. I decided to use my wish after all, she explained to Damien. I wished for Dad to know we're finally going to Japan. And that we're okay. Damien knelt beside her, placing his own awkwardly folded crane, the result of Amelia's patient teaching, next to hers. What did you wish for? Amelia asked curiously. Damien glanced at Lucille, who was arranging the flowers with careful attention. That I never forget what your father's bravery and your courage taught me. As they walked back to the car, Amelia slipped her small hand into Damien's for the first time. Her other hand already firmly in her mother's grasp. Together they formed an unexpected connection, not replacing what was lost, but building something new from its foundation. Kono bara wa anata no kokoro ni hikari o ataeru deshu, Amelia recited softly. Echoing the words that had started their journey, Damien smiled, completing the phrase he had now learned properly. These roses will bring light to your heart. And they had. Did you enjoy The Flower and the Billionaire? This story reminds us that sometimes the most powerful connections come from unexpected places. What other fateful encounters would you like to explore in future stories? Remember, the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that transform lives in ways we never imagined.